most importantly, I want to say thank you to everybody who's joined us today, because what that tells me is that you're all feeling a sense of urgency, that the same kind of urgency that I'm feeling right now, that Michelle's feeling, that so many of us feel as we look at the news and we talk to our friends and neighbors and those who are hurting. And I am here to say that help is on the way if we do the work, because there's nobody that I trust more to be able to heal this country and get it back on track than my dear friend Joe Biden. I don't think I have to reiterate the situation that we find ourselves in right now. Things were tough in 2008, 2009. We were going through the worst recession since the Great Depression, a massive financial crisis. We were still in the midst of two wars. We, I think, were overcoming a decade in which the possibilities of common work and common purpose had been diminished and downgraded, and government had been starved of the resources that were needed to make us a more equal and just and compassionate society. And yet, I have to say that the foundation stones, the institutions that we had in place, were still more or less intact. My predecessor, who I disagreed with on a whole host of issues, still had a basic regard for the rule of law and the importance of our institutions' democracy. On the world stage, there was still a sense that America needed to lead, and that leadership meant that, as imperfect as we might be, there were certain ideals and values that we were going to aspire to and advance, and that we cared about human rights, and we cared about battling against the oppression of peoples in distant lands, and that we tried to uphold, both in our own country but around the world, certain core principles around rule of law and the universal dignity of people, and the need for us to provide assistance to those who are suffering either from natural catastrophes or because of underdevelopment, a sense that our alliances were important, and that we should stand up for democracy and human rights. And so as challenging as those times were, and as much of a slog as it was to yank the economy out of the economic crisis that it was in, and in some ways things were tougher in terms of the financial system than they are today. But there was still a sense of a shared American idea that we could build on. And what we have seen over the last couple of years is a White House enabled by Republicans in Congress and a media structure that supports them, that has not just differed in terms of policy, but has gone at the very foundations of who we are and who we should be, that suggests facts don't matter, science doesn't matter, that suggests that a deadly disease is fake news, that sees the Justice Department as simply an extension and an arm of the personal concerns of the president, that actively promotes division and considers some people in this country more real as Americans than others. That we haven't seen out of the White House in a very long time. Good news, what makes me optimistic is the fact that there is a great awakening going on around the country, particularly among younger people who are saying not only are they fed up with the shambolic, disorganized, mean-spirited approach to governance that we've seen over the last couple of years, but more than that, are eager to take on some of the core challenges that have been facing this country for centuries, that are willing to demand an honest accounting of how we think about race in this country, that are insisting that issues like climate change can no longer be ignored or just addressed along the edges, that are demanding that we create an economy that works for all people and not just some, and recognizes that in order for us to actually deliver on the American promise, we can't just tinker around the edges, that we've got to take some big, more structural steps to ensure that everybody's getting a good education, and that if you're willing to work, you can find a job, and that that job pays a decent wage, and that nobody in the midst of a pandemic should be wondering whether or not they can afford health care. And so that sense of urgency is the thing that is making me optimistic. And it is then joined with the fact that we've got somebody who was with me every step of the way during the battles and challenges that we had during my administration. Not just a friend, but somebody who was a critical advisor, somebody who understood the issues and understood how they affected ordinary people. And that's Joe Biden. I have said this before, and I will say it again. This is somebody who knows what it's like to see in his own family economic hardship and a father losing a job and suddenly having to confront talking to his kid and maybe not being able to do everything for his family that he wanted to at certain stages, and the pain that that feels. That this is somebody who has been touched by tragedy in a direct, profound way, and has, as a consequence, enlarged his heart to embrace other people who are undergoing tragedy. This is somebody who, throughout his career, has shown that he's in it for the right reasons, who didn't get involved in politics to get rich or to hobnob with lobbyists, but was most comfortable with working people and people who are in the middle class or aspiring to the middle class, and asking them and listening to them, how can I help? And having him with me when we were getting the Recovery Act passed and we were getting the Affordable Care Act passed and dealing with issues like H1N1 that we feared could be a pandemic if it wasn't handled properly, and the Ebola crisis, somebody who understands the value of having the best people who actually know what they're doing and understand how to organize both the public and the private sector around solving problems. And somebody who believes in an America in which every kid should get a real shot, and that nobody's higher or lower than you, because everybody is endowed with not just certain inalienable rights, but also a core dignity that is the essence of the American community. That is Joe Biden. And so, I'll be honest, and hopefully Joe doesn't take offense by this. Joe's been around for a while. And sometimes what happens is we take that for granted. And there's a tendency always to look at for the new and shiny object. But for my money, one of the things that counts the most is, has somebody, whatever mistakes they make or whatever hardships they've gone through, have they been tested to have the kind of character that stands up, that is there when you need them, and that is going to be guided by the kinds of values and honesty and generosity that won't buckle when the going gets tough. And my experience with Joe Biden is that's who he is. And that's what we need right now. So bottom line is, I appreciate all of you being on this call, but man, this is serious business. Whatever you've done so far is not enough. And I hold myself and Michelle and our kids to that same standard. Whatever it is that we've done so far to help Joe Biden get elected, we have to do more.